I won the lottery, and with every dollar, I tried to build a future for my son's family. I bought them a house, furnished it, fixed what needed fixing. I gave them everything, thinking I was securing my place in their lives. But the more I gave, the smaller I seemed to become in their eyes. And when the money ran out, they started treating me like I was the one taking up space. This morning sealed my fate. I had just finished steeping my tea and was moving toward the sink when my elbow accidentally bumped into the edge of Layla's brand new coffee machine. The thing toppled and shattered on the tile floor in a loud, splintering crash. Glass and cold coffee splashed across my slippers. Before I could even react, Layla rushed in. "What are you doing, Camilla?" she barked, her voice sharp as a slap. She was still in her bathrobe, hair wrapped in a towel, holding her phone like she just paused a podcast. "That machine cost $300. I bent down slowly, careful not to cut my fingers. "It just slipped," I said. "I didn't mean to." She threw up her hands. "You never mean to. That's the whole problem. The blender, the dish rack, the candle holder, remember those? And let's not forget the time you flooded the laundry room by turning the washer on without shutting the door properly." I stayed crouched, wiping the floor, my back aching, heart thudding in my chest. "And you left the stove on twice last month," she added, pacing behind me now. "Or when Jack had to leave a meeting to come pay for groceries because you forgot your purse again." "I was distracted that day," I murmured. "I had Theo with me, remember?" She wasn't listening. "And the medicine, Camilla. You almost gave Theo laxatives instead of cough syrup. If I hadn't double-checked." She stopped and stared at me. "You're becoming a danger in this house." Just then, Jack came downstairs, buttoning his shirt. His expression was tight, eyes avoiding mine. "We need to talk," he said, "about your living situation." My hand stopped moving. I stood up slowly. "This is my house," I said. "I bought it for us, for you, for Layla, for Theo." Jack sighed. "You said it was a gift, Mom. You insisted we put the title in my name." "It doesn't mean I'm ready to be tossed out like garbage," I said, my voice shaking. "I'm still your mother." Layla crossed her arms. "We've been patient, but you keep making mistakes, dangerous ones. We found a place, a facility. It has nurses, activities, meals prepared. It's what you need." "I don't want to go," I said louder now. "You can't just decide this for me." "You have two choices," Jack said, his tone turning cold. "Go to the home we picked or find somewhere else to live. But you're not staying here." The words hit me like a slap. It wasn't a discussion. It was a verdict. I stood there in the silence that followed. I looked at the broken glass, the coffee soaking into the grout, my son's face so distant, and realized I had no say left in my own life. That evening, I stayed in my bedroom. I didn't have the strength to face them at dinner. I laid on my side, eyes open, listening to the sounds drifting from the dining room, forks clinking on plates, Layla's laughter, Theo chatting about something from school. No one called my name. When the noise finally stopped, I sat up. The room felt colder than usual, though the window was shut. I wrapped my shawl around my shoulders and walked out to the kitchen. The light above the sink buzzed softly. The dishwasher was running. On the second shelf in the fridge, wrapped in a wrinkled piece of plastic, was half a turkey sandwich. I wasn't sure if it was meant for me, but no one else was around. I ate it standing at the counter. The bread was dry, the lettuce limp. I chewed slowly, trying not to feel anything. As I put the plate in the sink, I heard small footsteps behind me. "Grandma?" I turned. Theo stood barefoot in his pajamas, clutching a cookie in both hands. His hair was messy, eyes wide. "Are you really leaving tomorrow?" he asked. I nodded, forcing a small smile. "That's what your mom and dad want." He looked at the cookie, then held it out. "You can take this with you for the trip." My throat tightened. I crouched down and took it gently. "Thank you, sweetheart." He leaned forward and hugged me, just a little squeeze. I held him, not wanting to let go. Then a voice shouted from upstairs. "Layla." "Theo." "Back to bed. Grandma needs to rest." He pulled back. I was a little sad now. "Night, Grandma." "Good night, my love." I watched him disappear up the stairs, his door click shut. A moment later, I went back to my room, cookies still in hand. I placed it on the dresser beside the lamp, then I sat on the bed, staring at the closet. After a long breath, I stood up and opened it. Packing didn't take long. I folded 2 pairs of slacks, a few sweaters, my nightgown. I tucked in my toothbrush, my reading glasses, my little jar of arthritis cream, then the crossword puzzle book Han used to tease me about. How many I left half-finished. And last, I picked up the photo. It sat in a simple wooden frame on the nightstand. Han, Jack, and me, taken the summer Jack turned 10, just like Theo. Now Han had his arm around us, smiling, his eyes crinkled at the corners. I held the frame to my chest and sat on the edge of the bed. "Look what's become of us, Han," I whispered. "Your boy is putting me out like I'm a guest who stayed too long, like I don't belong." Tears came slowly at first, then freely, not loud sobs, just the kind of crying that comes when your body knows there's no use fighting anymore. Outside, a breeze rustled the trees. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the heater. Inside, I sat with my suitcase zipped and ready by the door. Tomorrow they'll take me away, and I won't even leave with a goodbye from the people I gave everything to. When the morning came, it arrived gray and heavy, accompanied by relentless rain that tapped steadily against the windows, as if the world itself was mourning my departure. I stood quietly by the front door, my suitcase sitting silently beside me. I had dressed myself carefully in one of the simple cardigans that Han used to say brought out the color in my eyes, but no matter how carefully I dressed, I couldn't shake the feeling of being unwanted baggage, packed and ready to be sent away. Outside, the vehicle from the nursing home pulled up, its headlights dimly illuminating the rain-slicked driveway. A tall, expressionless young man stepped out, opening a large black umbrella and approaching the porch with mechanical movements. Jack and Layla stood side by side in the doorway behind me, their arms crossed tightly, their eyes dry and unreadable. No warmth, no farewell, just silence. I could sense the quiet relief radiating from them, as palpable as the chill in the air. They'd finally succeeded in removing the burden I had become. I glanced up the staircase, hoping to see Theo's sleepy face one last time, but the landing remained empty. Maybe it was better this way. Saying goodbye to him might have been more than I could bear. "Mrs. Camilla," the young man asked politely, breaking the tension-filled silence. "We should go." "Yes," I said softly, lifting my suitcase. Neither Jack nor Layla moved to help. I stepped out into the rain, the drops cold and biting even beneath the umbrella. With slow, deliberate steps, I approached the van. The door slammed shut behind me, sounding like the closing chapter of a book I'd never meant to finish so soon. I took my seat, buckled my seatbelt with trembling fingers, and stared out the rain-smeared window. Through the blurred glass, I saw my son and daughter-in-law turn away, retreating inside without a backward glance. The front door closed decisively behind them, as if locking away the remnants of my former life. As the van moved forward, leaving my old home behind, my eyes fixed upon the familiar streets blurring past. Houses I had known for decades faded one by one, replaced by fields and scattered woods, indistinct through the relentless rain. My thoughts drifted helplessly into the past, memories overtaking me as the windshield wipers rhythmically chased away the pouring rain. It had never been easy raising Jack alone after Han died. My husband's death had been sudden, brutal. A scaffolding accident at the construction site had robbed us both of the future we dreamed about. Jack was just 10, exactly the age Theo was now. Overnight, my role had expanded from mother to provider, protector, the anchor of a world that had fallen apart. I worked 2 jobs, pinched pennies, and sacrificed sleep and comfort to ensure Jack's life stayed as normal as possible. But no matter how exhausted or overwhelmed I felt, I never questioned my devotion to him. Jack was my everything, my sole reason to push forward. Time passed and Jack grew. He graduated from high school, went off to college, and soon found a job in the city. I was proud, incredibly proud, but the pride came at a cost. Our once close relationship slowly unraveled, weakened by the distance and the presence of Layla, the young woman who gradually replaced me in my son's affections. Layla wasn't openly hostile at first. She was subtle, quietly dismissive, a master of making me feel obsolete without ever raising her voice. Over time, I saw less and less of Jack. Holidays shortened, visits dwindled, phone calls grew infrequent and terse, as if speaking to me were just another obligation Jack needed to cross off a checklist. Then came the day I stopped at the gas station to use the restroom during one of my weekly grocery trips. I rarely bought lottery tickets, finding them silly, an idle hope for people who didn't know any better. But on a whim, purely out of boredom, I picked up a scratch-off ticket at the counter. I tucked it carelessly into my purse and thought nothing more of it until I got home that evening. After dinner, alone in my modest kitchen, I scratched the silvery film away. When the numbers revealed themselves clearly, $500,000, I felt the air leave my lungs. I stared at it for what felt like hours, disbelief slowly giving way to shock, then a strange sense of anxious excitement. That night, I couldn't sleep. I watched countless videos online, learning how winners should claim their prizes safely and sign the back of the ticket with shaking hands. In the morning, still unsure if I had imagined it all, I called Jack at his office in Grand Rapids, about an hour and 40 minutes away. My voice quivered with joy as I said, "Jack, I think I won the lottery, $500,000. I don't even know what to do. Can you come home?" Jack and Layla arrived that very evening, their smiles wide and bright. Layla brought flowers, something she'd never done before, and hugged me as if we'd always been close. They praised my good luck, called me brilliant for buying the ticket, and suggested we celebrate with champagne. Jack went out specially to buy it. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Layla, suddenly attentive and sweet, persuaded me to sell my small, humble home. "You deserve something nicer, Camilla," she coaxed. "A beautiful house near us where we can be a family again." The idea was irresistible. How could I say no? I agreed, handing over $350,000 to buy a spacious, beautiful home in their city neighborhood, keeping $150,000 to secure my retirement. The day we moved in together felt like the happiest day of my life. Watching little Theo run excitedly through the rooms, I believed with all my heart that this was my final reward for years of struggle. I had built this moment. I had earned it. But gradually, the smiles faded. Shortly after we settled, Jack asked to borrow $20,000 to invest in a business venture with a friend. I agreed without hesitation. Soon after, Layla needed $10,000 for a car payment. Over months, more requests came: money for groceries, vacations, Theo's guitar lessons, all drawn from my carefully saved funds. The money drained faster than I expected. Finally, when Layla planned a family vacation and casually asked me to contribute, I had to admit I was nearly out of money. I watched her face darken in silent frustration. After that day, their affection evaporated, quickly replaced by resentment and quiet hostility. Reminders to join them for meals disappeared. They stopped checking on me, stopped including me. When I broke something or forgot a detail, no one said, "Are you all right?" Instead, Layla's eyes narrowed, her lips pressed into thin lines, the kindness entirely gone. The van jolted slightly, pulling me sharply back to reality. We were now entering town, the streets filled with traffic lights and shops blurred by rain. The young man in the front seat was speaking into a radio, checking in with someone at the nursing home. He glanced back at me briefly, offering a polite nod. "Almost there, ma'am." I felt a cold ache inside my chest. This was not a journey I had chosen, yet it was my destination all the same. The memories of these last months flooded my thoughts again, the joy that had quickly dissolved into bitterness, my foolish trust, my loneliness that followed. Every new rejection, every disappointed look, the realization hit me with painful clarity. The winning ticket had never brought happiness. Instead, it had robbed me of dignity and respect. As the van slowed to stop outside a bleak gray building, the young man stepped out, opening an umbrella once more and waiting to escort me inside. I took a deep, shaky breath, trying to steady my nerves. I had imagined my last years so differently, wrapped in warmth and family. Instead, I was stepping into the unknown, abandoned and alone. The car door opened, bringing a rush of damp, chilly air. "We're here, Mrs. Camilla," he said gently. I gripped my small suitcase and stepped onto the wet pavement, the cold rain soaking through my shoes. Ahead of me, the nursing home loomed darkly, its windows reflecting nothing but the gray skies above. I had arrived at what felt like a prison, knowing deep in my bones I was here because I had dared to believe my family still needed me. But now the truth was undeniable. I was merely something to be discarded when the cost of keeping me became too inconvenient. The nursing home wasn't the warm, welcoming place you might see in a cheerful brochure. Instead, stepping inside felt more like entering a cold, clinical hospital, sterile, bleak, and anonymous. My suitcase squeaked softly against the gray vinyl flooring as I followed the nurse through the dimly lit hallway. She moved briskly ahead, barely glancing back, her crisp voice echoing slightly off the bare walls as she explained the rules in a mechanical, emotionless tone. "No phone calls after 8 in the evening, Mrs. Camilla. Breakfast at 7, lunch at noon, dinner at 6, lights out at 9:30 sharp, no exceptions. Activities every Sunday afternoon. Participation is mandatory. Noncompliance means revoking certain privileges." Privileges, I echoed softly, confused. "Phone calls, television, visitors. Everything here is earned. Follow the rules and you'll do fine." She placed something into my palm. I glanced down, seeing a small plastic device with a single button. "If you have an emergency, push this. Only in emergencies. Do you understand?" Her voice was sharp, implying that even genuine emergencies were an annoyance. "Yes," I said quietly, gripping the small button tightly. She stopped at a room marked 17 and unlocked the door with a jangling set of keys. The room was small, furnished with only a narrow bed, a tiny table, a stiff wooden chair, and a battered dresser with chipped paint. A single dim bulb illuminated the space. It looked more like a cell than a room meant for comfort. "Dinner is in half an hour. The dining hall is at the end of the corridor. Welcome to Meadow," she concluded without a trace of warmth, shutting the door firmly behind her. Sitting on the edge of the bed, I felt tears forming, but I quickly wiped them away. Crying wouldn't help here, where tears probably fell daily. I glanced around, feeling trapped and isolated, more forgotten than ever. When I entered the dining hall for the first time, the clinking of metal trays echoed loudly. Residents shuffled along slowly, their faces empty, their eyes dull with resignation. No laughter, no conversation, only the scraping of chairs and the low hum of an old television set mounted high on the wall, playing muted reruns of some decades-old sitcom. I picked at my dinner: lukewarm mashed potatoes, watery green beans, and an unidentified piece of overcooked meat, my appetite disappearing quickly. A woman sitting nearby caught my glance and nodded slightly, offering a gentle, sympathetic smile. "I'm Lucy," she said quietly. Her silver hair was neatly combed, her eyes sharp despite the lines that traced her face. "Camilla?" I replied, managing a faint smile in return. Lucy introduced me to her companions at the table: Helen, small and frail, her voice barely above a whisper; Anna, a cheerful but nervous woman whose eyes darted around anxiously; and Tom, an elderly gentleman with thick glasses who nodded silently as he ate. "It gets easier," Lucy said softly, reaching out and briefly touching my hand. "You get used to it after a while." Days at Meadow passed slowly in monotonous repetition. Meals came regularly, always tasteless and bland. Evenings were spent silently watching the same programs on the aging television, the volume always too low, the images fuzzy. At 8 every evening, the nurse sternly collected our phones, locking them in a cabinet. Each night at exactly 9:30, all lights went out, plunging the home into an uneasy darkness punctuated only by muffled cries from the nearby rooms. The first night was the hardest. Sleep refused to come easily. Instead, I lay awake, my mind flooded with painful memories. I recalled the early years after Han's death, The way I'd worked tirelessly, driven by love and duty, sewing clothes late at night, cleaning houses early in the morning. Every moment of exhaustion felt justified as long as Jack had a better life, as long as his childhood wasn't overshadowed by grief and poverty. I wondered how things had changed so drastically, how all those sacrifices had led me here, abandoned and unwanted. I remembered Layla clearly from her first visit home with Jack, how sweet and polite she had seemed, her voice had been soft, her eyes gentle. Back then, I'd felt relieved, even joyful, seeing Jack find someone who seemed genuinely kind. "Don't worry, Mrs. Camilla," she had said with a smile that felt so sincere at the time. "Jack and I will always take good care of you." Now the memory twisted inside me, her soft voice turned into an ugly mockery of the woman she'd reveal herself to be. Cold, calculating, cruel. Each evening, I tried desperately to call Jack. Sometimes Layla answered curtly, promising Jack would call back, but he never did. Most nights, the phone just rang unanswered, a lonely echo of my longing to reconnect. After a week, the silence began to feel intentional. I was forgotten, discarded, deliberately erased from their lives. In the days that followed, I formed quiet bonds with my companions. Lucy became my closest friend. Our conversations whispered late at night when the nurses weren't patrolling. Helen and Anna often joined us, huddled together in our small rooms or the cramped communal area, sharing quiet stories about families who rarely visited or memories of happier times. Tom, usually quiet, surprised me one afternoon by slipping me a small chocolate bar he'd hidden beneath his sweater. "Don't let them see," he whispered with a wink. "They'll take it away." That small act of kindness, so trivial and yet so meaningful, nearly brought me to tears in this place of cold, indifferent rules. Kindness felt like rebellion. But along with these gentle friendships came heartache. I witnessed scenes of neglect, residents lying alone, moaning softly for help that rarely came. One night, I saw a nurse shouting harshly at an elderly man who had spilled his juice, the humiliation clear on his trembling face. Another evening, I heard faint cries from the room next door, Anna quietly sobbing because she'd accidentally wet her bed and was now being berated by a nurse's assistant. My fear grew nightly. I worried constantly that I might become the next target. I often dreamed of leaving, returning to the warmth of a home that no longer welcomed me. But each call home reinforced my isolation. I had nowhere else to go. Lying awake night after night, my sleep came in fits, troubled by fragmented dreams of happier times with Han and little Jack. Sometimes I'd see Han clearly, hear his laughter, feel his comforting embrace. Then I'd wake abruptly, my heart racing, haunted by distant screams from other rooms, their pain raw and unbearable. Tonight, I lay awake again, staring at the cracked ceiling, wondering how much more I could endure. Loneliness and grief pressed heavily against my chest, choking me. I closed my eyes, desperately wishing for the oblivion of sleep. Then I heard it, another distant cry, a woman begging softly for help. Tears slipped down my face, knowing no one would come. My fingers tightened around the small emergency device, but I didn't press it. Emergencies were only to be called for in desperate circumstances, they told us. Was this woman's pain not desperate enough? Was mine? In that moment, anger began to rise within me, a quiet, defiant fury born from helplessness. I thought of the love and sacrifice I'd given freely throughout my life, how it had led me to this cold place of forgotten souls. I knew one thing clearly. I couldn't remain silent forever. Somehow, someday, I would reclaim the dignity that had been stripped from me. I owed myself at least that much. Closing my eyes, gripping the thin blanket tightly around my shoulders, I drifted into a troubled sleep, determined for the first time in months to find a way out of this dark, lonely place. As time passed, I slowly adjusted to the bleak rhythm of life in Meadowview. Days blended into each other, and eventually, the heartache and disappointment began to fade into numb acceptance. I forced myself to stop replaying scenes of betrayal, no longer picturing the winning lottery ticket that had started this spiral, nor Jack's distant, indifferent gaze, nor Layla's harsh voice echoing accusations. It hurt less this way, embracing emptiness over pain. On a gray Sunday morning, we gathered as usual in the small community room. It was our mandatory weekly activity, carefully staged, rehearsed, and controlled by the nurses. We sat stiffly, waiting for the group of volunteers who visited once a month to deliver donated gifts, groceries, and a brief glimpse of compassion that always seemed superficial and hurried. The staff had spent yesterday reminding us sternly, smile and be thankful. Not one word about how things are here, understand. The younger nurse had even taken my hand, squeezing it firmly as she whispered, "Behave, Mrs. Camilla, or else." Her warning hung heavily in the air, unspoken but clear. The door opened, and in walked the visitors, fresh-faced college students and cheerful young professionals carrying brightly wrapped packages. Following behind them, wearing her carefully practiced smile, came our director, Mrs. Bell. Her expression looked painfully forced, a thin grimace rather than a sincere welcome. "Good morning, everyone," she called out in an artificially bright voice. "Today is a special day. A generous group of volunteers has come to share some joy with you all." We clapped politely, faces fixed in expressions of rehearsed gratitude. Lucy leaned toward me slightly, whispering dryly, "Look at her face. She looks like she's choking on her own lies." I stifled a small laugh, biting the inside of my cheek. One volunteer, a young woman with long dark hair and gentle, earnest eyes, approached our table. She introduced herself as Nancy, a 22-year-old law intern from a nearby university. Nancy had a warmth that seemed genuine, unlike the polished cheerfulness of her companions. "How are you doing today?" she asked softly, handing me a beautifully wrapped parcel containing toiletries, sweets, and soft slippers. "I hope this small gift helps brighten your day." I nodded, accepting the gift gratefully. Nancy took a seat beside me, her eyes studying my face intently. Her sincerity made my carefully constructed facade begin to crumble. "Have you been here?" she asked, her voice kind and patient. "A few months," I answered quietly, keeping my voice carefully neutral. Nancy hesitated, then asked gently, "Do you have family who visit you?" "No," I said, shaking my head slowly. "My son, he's the one who put me here. He and my daughter-in-law decided I wasn't safe living with them anymore." A quiet anger sparked briefly in Nancy's eyes. She leaned closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "Did you want to come here?" "No," I admitted softly, my voice trembling despite my effort to remain calm. "They didn't give me much of a choice." Nancy's expression shifted, becoming more determined. She reached out and gently took my hand, her youthful grip surprisingly strong. "You know, Camilla, what happened to you happens every day, more than most people realize. Families use these places to discard their elders, thinking no one will question them. But they're wrong. It's abuse, plain and simple." Her words caught me off guard. I had never labeled it so bluntly, never confronted that uncomfortable truth head-on. Nancy saw my hesitation. "I'm studying elder law," she explained earnestly. "Stories like yours remind me why it's important. What your family did is illegal. With the right lawyer, you can stand up for yourself. You could get justice. Let me help you." Her passionate voice stirred something deep within me. Yet fear quickly drowned out the spark. "I don't know," I whispered hesitantly, glancing around nervously. "I wouldn't even know where to begin. And Jack, he's still my son. I don't think I can sue my own child." Nancy squeezed my hand reassuringly. "Just think about it," she said gently, pulling out her phone and jotting down her number on a small slip of paper. "Here's my number and my Facebook. If you decide you want help, I promise I'll be there." As Nancy walked away, I stared down at the tiny piece of paper, my heart heavy with doubt, yet strangely hopeful. Lucy and Helen glanced at me, curiously from across the table. "What did she say?" Lucy asked softly, leaning toward me. She seemed pretty serious. I hesitated for a moment before explaining what Nancy had said. Lucy's eyes lit up immediately. her expression filling with excitement. "Camilla, you must do it. You deserve better than this." "We all do." Tom nodded firmly. "Fight back. Don't let them win." Helen reached across the table, gripping my hand. Her frail fingers trembled, but her voice was strong. "Camilla, we're all behind you." Encouraged by my friends, I found myself later that night cautiously typing into my phone, slowly browsing through complicated legal websites, trying desperately to understand terms like elder, financial abuse, and coercion. The words blurred together, overwhelming me with their complexity. But I persisted until exhaustion won out. After a restless sleep, haunted by confusing dreams, I woke early the next morning, determined yet unsure. By midday, I summoned enough courage to call Nancy. "I've been thinking," I began carefully, my voice trembling with anxiety. "I don't know what steps to take next." Nancy's voice brightened immediately. "You don't have to do this alone, Camilla. I'll help you reach out to the Elder Protection Center. They offer free consultations. Let me set it up." Her practical kindness nearly brought tears to my eyes. After weeks of feeling helpless, this small act of support felt monumental. Yet that evening brought a painful reminder of the urgency I'd been trying to ignore. Sophia, another resident only slightly older than me, passed away suddenly from a stroke. She had always been cheerful, telling stories and jokes to lighten our heavy days. Seeing her wheeled out, covered by a stark white sheet, shattered my fragile optimism. Lucy and I held each other quietly, weeping as we mourned our friend. That night, unable to sleep, I stared into the darkness, my heart pounding in my chest as I realized the brutal truth. Life here was precarious and fleeting. Sophia's death had stripped away the comforting illusion of safety, reminding me how quickly I too could be forgotten beneath a white sheet. I gripped the paper. With Nancy's number tightly in my hand, I felt the rising anger I'd buried for too long. Anger at Jack, at Layla, at this place that treated me as disposable. "I can't stay here," I whispered into the empty room, tears silently streaming down my cheeks. "I won't just wait to fade away." Sophia's cheerful laughter echoed faintly in my memory, urging me to take action. I owed it to her, to myself, and to every forgotten soul in Meadowview. "I'll fight," I whispered to the shadows. "I'll fight for the dignity they stole from me." For the first time since entering this cold, indifferent place, I felt a spark ignite within. A small, fragile flame of courage, determined and fierce, no matter how frightening or uncertain the journey might become. I was finally ready to reclaim my life. I wouldn't be silent anymore. Sitting at the tiny reading table tucked into the far corner of the Meadowview library, I nervously opened the small notebook Nancy had given me. My hands trembled slightly as I tried to keep up with the notes she'd sent. Websites, contacts, procedures I should follow. To me, navigating these complicated steps felt like entering a foreign world, and I felt every bit as uncertain as a child on their first day of school. Despite my uncertainty, I felt an undeniable flicker of determination. Nancy's enthusiasm had ignited something within me that had been dormant for far too long. Each careful note I took felt like a small rebellion, each stroke of my pen a quiet declaration of independence. Nancy had provided me with a template letter requesting legal assistance, along with instructions on how to document my story in detail. She'd emphasized how crucial it was to recount everything from the moment I'd held that winning lottery ticket in my trembling fingers to the day my own family had quietly abandoned me here. As I wrote, my heart ached with every sentence, reliving the moments of initial joy, quickly followed by betrayal, opening wounds I had tried to close. Each detail hurt. The look of faint kindness on Jack's face when he learned about the lottery win. Layla's manipulative words urging me to sell my home. And the slow erosion of my dignity as my remaining funds were drained bit by bit. Yet despite the heaviness, I also felt relief. Someone, Nancy, finally believed me and stood beside me. I was no longer alone. 2 days later, Nancy arranged for me to meet with a lawyer named Mr. Goldberg through a Zoom call, which took place in the small common room of Meadow. A young, kind-hearted nursing assistant named Hannah had helped me set up the computer, gently reassuring me as she adjusted the camera and microphone. "You'll do great, Mrs. Camilla," she whispered, giving my shoulder a comforting squeeze. When Mr. Goldberg's face appeared on the screen, a middle-aged man with wise eyes and a patient smile, my heart raced. The realization struck me sharply. I was about to take legal action against my own child. Even though Jack had hurt me, he was still my son. I took a deep, shaky breath, feeling waves of guilt and anxiety wash over me. Yet Mr. Goldberg spoke gently, patiently guiding me through the process. He asked detailed questions about documents, financial transactions, text messages, and evidence that could support my case. Each question revealed how naive and trusting I had been. Regret filled me. Why hadn't I been more cautious? Why had I given away control of my finances so easily? I had believed my own child would protect me, but now I realized how deeply mistaken I had been. As we ended our call, Mr. Goldberg said calmly, "Camilla, gather every piece of evidence you can. The more you can provide, the stronger your case will be." "I'll try," I whispered, feeling overwhelmed. So many documents were lost, discarded by my own negligence. But I knew I had to find whatever remained. Thankfully, Nancy reassured me when I shared my worries. She guided me through recovering online statements from my bank account. To my relief, I found multiple emails sent to my old friend Marie, screenshots of my bank statements when I'd asked for her financial advice, unaware how vital these simple acts would later become. With Nancy's help, each document printed out felt like another lifeline, a sturdy anchor holding me steady amidst stormy waters. In the days that followed, Lucy and Tom joined me at the library table each afternoon, diligently creating a detailed list. Lucy carefully noted every dollar Jack and Layla had coaxed or manipulated out of me. $20,000 here, $10,000 there. Tom listed every major purchase I'd indirectly funded: Layla's car payments, Theo's expensive guitar lessons, even the costly furnishings for their new home. "You aren't alone anymore, Camilla," Lucy reminded me gently as we worked. Her voice was firm, her eyes determined. Each note we made strengthened me, easing my loneliness. I finally felt seen, understood, and supported. 1 week later, Mr. Goldberg sent the first formal legal notice to Jack and Layla. It stated clearly that their exploitation had been documented and demanded the immediate return of misappropriated funds, along with a firm warning of potential legal action. Reading the formal words, I felt a heavy weight of apprehension settle upon me. This notice marked the start of a potentially long, painful battle. 2 days after the letter was sent, my phone buzzed harshly beside my bed. My breath caught. It was Jack calling. The screen flashed his name for the first time since they'd left me here, abandoned and forgotten. When I answered, his voice was cold and furious. "Have you lost your mind, Mom? After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us? You want to embarrass us in front of everyone?" I trembled with hurt, yet I found strength from somewhere deep within myself. I steadied my voice as best as I could. "I'm not suing you, Jack," I said quietly but firmly. "I'm simply taking back what's mine." He hung up abruptly. The silence afterward felt loud, suffocating. That evening, to my shock, Jack and Layla suddenly appeared at Meadow. Their voices were soft, falsely sweet, their expressions forced with strange smiles. "We're sorry, Mom," Jack said gently, eyes pleading. "Come home. We'll make things right." Layla nodded earnestly, eyes shining with insincerity. My chest tightened as her voice rang painfully familiar, reminding me of her cruel words months ago, "a mouth to feed." I straightened in my chair, meeting Layla's gaze directly. "I had my own home before buying the house for you," I said, my voice steady and unyielding. "Now I will find another place where I'm respected and valued." Layla's mask of kindness shattered instantly. Her voice sharpened into a vicious hiss. "You senile old woman, you've completely lost it. Suing your own child? You're digging your own grave, you hear me." Pain rippled through me, but no tears fell this time. Quietly, I glanced toward the small black camera in the corner of the visitor's lounge, knowing every word was recorded. Jack stepped forward, angrily shouting, "If you dare go through with this, you'll regret it." Moments later, security intervened. I stood in silence as they were escorted out, Jack shouting threats until the doors closed firmly behind him. I watched numbly, feeling like my heart had been ripped open anew. Later, alone in my dimly lit room, I held the old photograph of my small family, Han, Jack, and me. My fingers traced Han's smiling face, and tears finally escaped, slipping silently down my cheeks. My voice trembled as I whispered to his memory, "Han, the son we loved has turned against me. But I promise you I will not break." My tears flowed freely now, yet my heart hardened with renewed strength as I clutched the photo tightly. I felt a fierce resolve bloom within me, more powerful than ever before. Yes, the battle ahead would be difficult, perhaps agonizing, yet finally I felt certain I would not surrender. I was ready to reclaim my dignity, my self-worth, and my life. For the first time in many months, the fire within me blazed brightly, undaunted by sorrow or fear. Before the trial, I dreamed of Han, my late husband, whom I had lost so long ago. He sat on the edge of the bed, his gentle face unchanged from the days when we were still together. His voice was warm, every word clear and honest, as if he were still here with me. "You did nothing wrong. You're not alone, Camilla." When I woke, my cheeks were wet with tears. I gently wiped them away and reached for the old family photo that always rested by my pillow. Strangely, a sense of peace washed over me. I knew Han was still with me, watching over me from wherever he might be. The next morning, the sky was overcast and a light drizzle fell. I chose a simple dark outfit and tied my hair neatly at the nape of my neck. A small white car from the Elder Protection Organization waited at the gate of Meadow Nursing Home. Nancy arrived early to go with me. She held my aged hand tightly as we got into the car. The warmth of her grip gave me a flicker of courage. As we rode, I felt small, fragile in the face of the legal battle ahead, and yet somewhere deep inside, a quiet strength was rising. I didn't know where it came from, maybe from Han's voice in my dream, or maybe from the unwavering belief I saw in Nancy's eyes. When we pulled up outside the Washington County Civil Court in Ann Arbor, I stepped out with shaky legs. Nancy stayed close, gently supporting me as we walked inside. Before the hearing began, Mr. Goldberg, my attorney, leaned in with a soft reminder, "Camilla, don't worry. Just tell the truth, we'll handle the rest." I gave a small nod, taking a deep breath to steady the turmoil inside me. This was the first time in my life I would sit as a plaintiff across from the very child I had raised. As I entered the courtroom, I saw Jack and Layla seated at the defendant's table. Jack wore a neat gray suit. Layla was dressed elegantly. They looked at me with cold, distant eyes, as if I were a stranger, not the mother who had raised Jack alone after his father died. What hurt even more was that Thea wasn't there. I suppose they didn't want the child to witness any of this. Mr. Goldberg began with a clear and firm account of what had happened, how I had trusted my son and daughter-in-law with everything, the money, the house, my hope for a peaceful old age, and how they had slowly drained me of every dollar before forcing me into a low-cost nursing home under unjust pretenses. I sat there, ashamed that my private story was now being laid bare in a public courtroom, but I also felt a deep relief. Finally, someone was standing with me. Mr. Goldberg then presented the evidence. Detailed bank statements showing large withdrawals, text messages from Layla demanding I transfer money, and most damning of all, the video footage from the nursing home's visitor room where Jack and Layla berated me harshly. Each piece of evidence cut like a knife, but I knew this was no time for softness. Layla stood and raised her voice in rebuttal, her tone sharp and defensive. "She's clearly lost it. She almost gave my son the wrong medication, laxatives instead of cold medicine. We had no choice but to put her in a care home for her safety and for our child's." I clenched my hands tightly in my lap, forcing myself to stay calm. Inside, I was boiling with anger, but I didn't speak. I only looked down at my trembling fingers. Mr. Goldberg immediately countered. There is no formal medical diagnosis confirming that Mrs. Camilla has any cognitive impairment. These accusations conveniently surfaced only after her lottery winnings had nearly run dry. Then Jack's side suddenly presented a paper from their family doctor claiming I had mild cognitive decline based on a visit I'd had months ago when I was running a fever. I stared at the document, realizing in a heartbeat it was nothing but a tool meant to strip me of my legal competence. Mr. Goldberg swiftly objected, pointing out that the document lacked any signature from a certified neurologist or psychiatrist, rendering it legally meaningless. The court then allowed witnesses. I was surprised when Helen entered the room. Her voice trembled slightly, but her words were strong. Camilla is perfectly lucid. Every morning she reads the newspaper and does crossword puzzles. She told me everything that happened at home. They treated her like an A-team, ungrateful people, that's what they are. Even young nurse Hannah, who regularly checked my vitals, stepped up and confirmed that I had always been clear-headed and fully aware. I looked at her with teary gratitude, as if she were the granddaughter I never had. At last, I was given the chance to speak. I stood up, my knees unsteady, but I didn't cry. I began softly. I never imagined I'd be standing here across from my own child. I don't want much, just a place to call home and a little respect. I don't have a fancy education. I don't know much about the law, but I know when something is wrong. The room fell into silence. My words weren't dramatic. They didn't need to be. They came from my heart. After nearly an hour of deliberation, the judge returned to deliver the verdict. This court finds that financial abuse of an elderly individual has occurred. Jack and Layla are ordered to return the home they took from Mrs. Camilla, as well as the $90,000 in misappropriated funds and related legal fees. Furthermore, under elder protection law, both defendants are prohibited from contacting Mrs. Camilla for 90 days. I let out a slow breath, not joy, just relief. A burden I had carried for far too long had finally been lifted. Outside in the hallway, Nancy threw her arms around me, her face glowing with happiness. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Mr. Tom calling from Meadowview. "Camilla, everyone here is waiting to hear. Did you win?" And for the first time in many, many years, I realized I wasn't alone anymore. I had true friends, and I had found myself again. 1 week after the court verdict, I found myself quietly seated in the lounge of Meadowview Nursing Home, holding a copy of the Ann Arbor Observer. Rain tapped lightly on the windows as I read the headline again. 74-year-old Mother sues son. A financial abuse case shocks the Michigan community. I read the article carefully. One particular line made me pause. Camilla Ardit, a victim betrayed by her own blood, has taught the community a profound lesson about standing up to silence and injustice. I sighed quietly, folding the newspaper gently. Lucy, sitting across from me knitting, glanced up. "You should be proud," she encouraged softly. I shook my head. They should write about women like Sophia, women who died before they could reclaim their dignity, not me. The days following the publication brought an unexpected flurry of calls. Former neighbors from our old street, where I'd lived before selling my house to help Jack buy his, called to offer kind words. Some distant relatives reached out too, awkwardly comforting me while subtly delivering news about the consequences Jack and Layla were now facing. It was through these hesitant conversations I learned just how swiftly the consequences were unfolding for my son and his wife. At Jack's workplace, a respected interior design firm in Grand Rapids, he'd been summoned by his supervisor. With an uncomfortable glance, his boss got straight to the point. "We can't keep you here, Jack. I know it's personal, but the company can't be associated with a court case involving elder financial abuse." Jack sat in stunned silence, his throat tight, his fists clenched. Never before had the world turned against him so clearly. All his life, being a good son had been his protective shield. Now it shattered instantly. Without a word, he gathered his belongings, walked out of the office, and felt the curious, judgmental stares of former colleagues burning into his back. Layla's situation wasn't better. At the financial company where she had proudly built her career, whispers now shadowed every step she took. One afternoon in the break room, she overheard a junior colleague muttering softly to another, "Did you hear she stole her mother-in-law's lottery winnings and dumped the poor lady in some nursing home? Terrible, isn't it?" Layla slammed her purse onto the table, the noise loud enough to silence the whispers temporarily. Her face burned with humiliation and fury. "They don't understand anything," she hissed under her breath. Financial institutions began distancing themselves as well. The bank notified them that the recently approved mortgage for their house was canceled, citing that both their names had appeared on the elder abuse registry. Their credit scores plummeted dramatically. Jack crumpled the bank's letter in frustration, throwing it violently toward the trash can. He kicked at a chair, nearly toppling it. All this trouble because of that old woman, he shouted into the emptiness of his living room, blind to the irony that the old woman was his own mother. The social fallout was just as harsh. Friends and relatives who once eagerly praised their beautiful new home began drifting away. Congratulatory messages turned into uncomfortable silence, as if any association with Jack and Layla might taint them too. Layla, desperate for comfort, called her younger sister, but instead of sympathy, she heard her sister's blunt words, "If you could treat your own mother-in-law like that, you'd do it to our mother too someday. I don't want anything to do with this." Layla ended the call abruptly, stunned. Even family ties were now unraveling before her eyes. Amidst the chaos, the house I had bought, once solely in Jack's name, was forced onto the market by court order, and the proceeds returned to me. The day I signed those papers at the lawyer's office was strangely calm. As I held the pen and put my signature to paper, I felt no joy or triumph, only an aching emptiness. No amount of money could ever buy back the years I'd spent being disrespected and neglected. A day later, Nancy called me excitedly. Her voice brimmed with youthful pride. "Camilla, you won't believe it. I based my graduation thesis on your case. My professor called. Your story is truly inspiring." Hearing her genuine enthusiasm, I couldn't help but smile softly for the first time in a very long while. A young person was thanking me from the heart, not because I was useful to them, but because my actions had meaning. "I'm proud of you too, Nancy," I answered softly. "Thank you for reminding me it's never too late to fight back." That evening, I sat quietly with Lucy and Tom in the community lounge, recounting the trial once again. I described the judge's ruling, the details of the verdict, and how the media had covered the whole event. Lucy placed a gentle hand on mine, smiling warmly. "You did it, Camilla. On behalf of every person who has been stepped on and forgotten, thank you." I smiled faintly, but inside, a quiet sadness remained. Victory hadn't erased the scar left by family betrayal. The truth was, beneath the relief, I still missed the son I once had, the child who was lost somewhere along life's complicated path. Late that night, unable to sleep, I rummaged through a dusty cardboard box retrieved from storage. Carefully, I pulled out an old family photo album. Page by page, I revisited happier times. There was Han, my late husband, patiently teaching Jack how to ride his first bicycle. Another photo captured Jack proudly holding his high school diploma, smiling as wide as the sky. Tears formed silently as my fingers traced their familiar faces. I whispered softly into the quiet darkness of the room. "You remember Han? He was such a good boy once, kind, thoughtful, but poverty, ambition, and selfishness erased all that." The pain in my chest was sharp, yet different now, not a raw, unhealed wound, but the steady ache of acceptance. I knew in my heart I had done the right thing. Han's gentle eyes in the photograph seemed to agree. Setting the album aside gently, I wiped away tears, took a deep breath, and laid my head back against a pillow. My battle was over. Justice had been served, consequences had been faced, but the echoes of family betrayal would remain, a quiet companion reminding me of what had been, and lost, and what strength I had gained. I closed my eyes, breathing steadily. Tomorrow would come, and I would face it carrying both my scars and newfound dignity with quiet pride. Several months after the trial, the final checks arrived. Restitution from the sale of the house I had once bought with my lottery winnings. Most of the money was rightfully mine, reassessed at market value. It wasn't as much as the original prize, of course, but it was enough. Enough to start over, enough to breathe again. I didn't count it in fear or excitement. Instead, I quietly wrote a $50,000 donation to the elder justice organization that had helped me find my voice. I sent another $20,000 to Nancy for her education. She called the next morning to say she couldn't accept it. I smiled and told her to think of it as a seed for her future. She still declined, so instead, I used part of it to purchase mobility aids, new blankets, and small comforts for my friends. Back at the nursing home, the smiles I saw when the packages arrived were warmer than any gratitude I'd felt in years. It had been so long since they'd received anything that wasn't rationed or begrudgingly handed to them. I didn't want to buy another big house. I chose a modest one-bedroom apartment in Ypsilanti Township, about 20 minutes from Ann Arbor. The building had an elevator and housed mostly seniors living alone. It sat close to a community park and a small library branch. My apartment was quiet, with sun spilling into the kitchen every morning and the soft murmur of birds in the trees outside. It wasn't luxury, but it was mine, and most importantly, it was a place where I was simply Camilla, not mom, not burden, not patient, just me. The day I moved in, Lucy and Mr. Tom were granted permission to leave the facility to help me pack and settle. Nancy came too, carrying a small envelope with a handwritten note inside. "This is not the end. This is your new chapter." I hugged each of them at the threshold. No grand speeches, no forced smiles, just warmth and a shared sense of something quietly victorious. In my new kitchen, I found a small space for an old photo of the three of us, me, Han, and little Jack. I placed it in a hinged frame with a cover, one that I could open when I was ready. For now, I kept it closed, not out of denial, but as a gentle boundary. I wasn't trying to forget the past. I was simply not letting it dictate who I was anymore. Every morning, I walked to the park with a warm mug of coffee, sitting on the same bench by the pond. There were other women my age gathered, some with knitting in their laps, others simply watching the squirrels scurry past. One morning, a petite lady in a lavender cardigan leaned over and asked, "Haven't seen you around before?" "Just moved here." I smiled and nodded. "You could say that." I just stepped out of something that looked like a home, but felt like a trap, one with blood ties. She blinked, then chuckled softly. "Well, you found the right place. Here, we all get to be whoever we choose." Some afternoons, I'd return home, water the small potted plant on my windowsill, or try a new recipe I'd clipped from the community bulletin board. The world outside had calmed, but inside, I was still learning how to live again. Then one quiet evening, as dusk turned the sky violet, I received a message on my phone. It was from Jack, just one line. "I'm sorry. If you want to see Theo, we can bring him to you." I sat for a long time, staring at the screen. My hand didn't move. My heart did, slowly, painfully.
I missed Theo.
I missed being someone's mother, someone's grandmother, but I didn't reply, not yet. I didn't know if Jack's apology was real or simply another attempt to take something. I wasn't ready to open that door. Some wounds needed time. Not to heal necessarily, but to stop bleeding. That night, I baked a tray of oatmeal cookies, the smell filling the apartment like old memories made new. I turned on the radio, found a classical music station, and let the notes carry me through the silence. As the cookies cooled, I sat at my small table, hands wrapped around a warm cup of tea. The lights dimmed gently outside, the wind rustled the leaves like a lullaby for the living, and I whispered to no one in particular. Maybe to Han, maybe just to myself. I used to think being a mother meant giving everything away, but now I understand. Before I'm a mother, I'm a person, and a person deserves to be loved, to keep her dignity, to be seen. this story touched something in you. Please like, share, and subscribe to our channel, Forgotten Mothers. Together, we can keep these stories alive for those who've been unheard for too long. Thank you so much for watching, wishing you peace, good health, and all the goodness life still has to offer.